right about now. The Funk Soul Brother, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, right about now. Right up now, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, right about now. Now.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the Right About Now podcast. This is John Small. All right. On this episode, we're going to talk to Andrew Bridgeman, who is publishing his first novel, Fortunate Son, at the age of 59. And what a debut novel it is. But before we launch into it, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. Now, number one, if you are a writer and you're feeling a bit overwhelmed and worried about the rapid ascent of generative AI like ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude, well, I've got some hopefully good news. I will be teaching a masterclass on this topic on October 20th. It's called Meet Your New Writing Partner, Generative AI. And this live 2.5-hour class will happen online. And in it, I'll unpack how to use AI both ethically and efficiently to help you brainstorm story ideas, research stories, develop outlines, copy edit, and even craft concise copy. And to all our panicked listeners out there, don't worry, AI will not replace us, at least not yet. Anybody who's worked with AI knows that it's kind of a crummy writer, but it is an unbelievably helpful tool in helping writers. I don't actually know what I would do without AI in this day and age. So excited to share that with you. And I also want to remind you that my new book is out. It's called Right About Now. And the book takes a deep dive into the inspirational backstories of authors such as Kristen Hanna and Dave Gran and Max Brooks. You can find it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and at select bookstores, including Chevalier Books in my hometown of Los Angeles. So I hope you'll check that out. And if you share this podcast episode on your social using the hashtag WriteAboutNowPodcast, I will select 3 winners to receive a free copy of the book. So I will be on the lookout for that. Okay, so let's get to the show. Talk about interesting backstories. Andrew Bridgeman has done everything from selling carpets to selling insurance. But his lifelong dream, like so many of us, was to publish a novel. And now he's done it at the age of 59 with a novel called Fortunate Son. It's a political thriller with memorable characters and crazy plot twists. And I honestly think it was very hard to put down. Now, I don't have a lot of novelists on the show, and that's not because I don't love novels. It's because it's just a bandwidth thing. I feel like I really need to invest the time to read their novels before I bring them on, and sometimes I just don't have the time. So I will confess that I had to be convinced to read Andrew's novel a few times by a very good but persistent publicist, and I am glad that she put the pressure on because I really enjoyed reading this book. It really kept me up, turning pages and seeing how it all turned out. It is the classic page turner. And Andrew is here to tell you all about his journey to writing this book. And hopefully he'll inspire listeners, whatever their creative dream is, to realize that dream. Because that's what we're all about it right about now, realizing dreams. So without further ado, I bring you Andrew Bridgeman. Andrew Bridgeman, welcome to the Right About Now podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate it. Thanks, John.
And really, congratulations on this debut novel. It is such a great read, really makes you not want to put it down. Thanks for a sleepless night. I will confess that I am not entirely done with it. And I'm like afraid to even talk about it because I don't want you to spoil the ending for me. So please don't spoil the ending. I'm about 3/4 of the way done, and I can tell you that it is pretty riveting.
Good.
This is your first novel. I'd love to hear a little bit about life before Fortunate Son. Who was Andrew? Because apparently your life has had as many twists and turns as your main characters, as your plot lines. But anyway, tell me, you've had a lot of different careers, correct?
Yeah, I've done a lot of odd things. I graduated from a liberal arts college in Pennsylvania. And
which one?
With history, Dickinson.
Dickinson.
Carlisle.
Dickinson. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was a history major. So most of my friends decided to go to law, and I had no desire to do that. So I was kind of a little lost. So as one does, I took a job selling carpet out of a minivan in Iowa.
Okay. Hold on.
Yeah,
How did you get from Pennsylvania to Iowa with carpets?
Yeah. It was a job. There was a carpet company in the college that in Carlisle, and I got a job in February. So I had a job before anybody else did. And that's all that mattered to me was graduating with no pressure. Didn't really think it through. Didn't think a lot of things through, John, as I was younger.
Who does at that age? Yeah.
So I found myself in Iowa and in South Dakota, with a minivan and carpet. And then somehow ended up in Peoria, where I was thankfully fired from that job and worked for a university and played rugby throughout the whole time. So I was playing rugby in college and in Iowa and in New York City. And
professionally?
No. Just dumb, drunken, fun, college stuff. But I played for 15 years and then worked for a university, worked for Bradley University in admissions and in development. And then got into sales and did a lot of that. And it's kind of a boring story, really. It was just, I had taken writing in college and loved it. And it was the one subject that I couldn't get enough of. But I don't think I didn't have the self-confidence or the self-image to imagine myself as a writer. So I put that on hold for a very, very long time. And thankfully, it worked out a little late, but I'm probably a better writer because I did it late than I would have been if I had tried it right away. So that's what I'm telling myself anyway.
It's a great story. Do you mind me asking how old you are?
I just turned 59.
Wow. Okay. That's inspiring to me. Because
it's like, wow, that's super old.
No. Listen, I'm not much younger. I'm a few years younger than you. I'm in my 50s as well, right? And I have yet to write my novel. And of course, I've been thinking about it. I've been a writer my whole life, but I've been thinking about writing a novel my whole life. And just, I guess have the same reservations as you. Don't think I'm really a novelist. I'm more of a journalist, even though I love novels and read more novels probably than I read nonfiction. But I'm wondering what changed for you, because 59, what changed?
Well, and I should say that 59 is when this book is releasing. I probably started at, 5 years or so ago. I've always been curious about things, whether it's been, I wonder if I could act in a play. I wonder if I could be a jazz singer. I wonder if I could teach myself how to play piano or guitar. So I've kind of had this curiosity about trying to challenge myself. And I got to a point where, we were kind of on a glide path towards retirement. My wife thankfully took over our small insurance agency. So I had the time and I told her kind of meekly, I said, well, I always wanted to write a book and I've been thinking about it. And she said, you have to. And I'm married to someone who sees more of my ability than I do. She recognizes things in me that I don't. So I promised her that I would try it. And it was a long slog of learning on my own. But we got there. So, but probably 3 failed novels that I'd gotten through about 60% of, and that weren't working, and finally got this thing done. So
you started other different ideas, different topics, and then kind of got through half, like 60% half, and then we're just like, okay, put this one not in.
Yeah, it was an ugly, embarrassing journey to try to become a writer. Mm-hmm. I started with this thought of, I put together really good emails, so I probably should write. And I remember being a good writer in college. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to call myself a writer and I'm going to grow my beard long. And it's all going to fall into place. And live in New Hampshire. It's
like
all
J.D. Salinger. Didn't J.D. Salinger live in New Hampshire?
Yeah, all the best. Irving. I mean, they all did.
Yeah, Irving.
And so I think I had one piece of writing advice that I had heard was write what you know. And I thought, okay, well, what do I know? Well, I've been in business and I was a history major. So I'll write the first business history fiction book. And that didn't go well. There's a reason it's not a genre. But, that's kind of how it starts. And you fall in love with the first time you turn a phrase and you're excited about it. And then you realize that it was orbiting nothing and it meant nothing. But it's just this gradual progression. And you've been doing this so long. Do you remember what that was like, John, when you kind of first fell in love with what the words sounded like on a page?
I don't think that ever changes. I think, and I was just talking, I teach a writing class. I was just telling my students, beware of the mistress novel, right? Or the mistress story in this case, because we're writing articles where it's like you're starting one article and you're so in love with it, but then you start having another idea about another book and suddenly you become in love with that idea. That's your mistress book, right? And then you don't want to finish the one that you're working on. And that happens a lot. It's important to me that the supplements that I take are really high quality. And that's why for the last 2 years, I've been drinking AG1. Unlike many supplement brands, AG1 conducts relentless testing, and it works. AG1 isn't just a buzzword, it's a commitment backed by expert-led scientific research, high-quality ingredients, industry-leading manufacturing, and rigorous testing. They test it for 950 contaminants and banned substances. Taking care of my health shouldn't be complicated, and AG1 simplifies this by replacing multiple health supplements like multivitamins and digestive aids, and just putting it all in one simple scoop. I like simple, and I like scoops. So if you want to replace your multivitamin and more, start with AG1. Here's what I can do for you. You try AG1 and you will get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3 and K2 plus 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first subscription. All you have to do is go to drinkag1.com/writeaboutnow, WRITE about now. That's drinkag1.com/writeaboutnow. Check it out now.
Yeah.
I think we all fall in love with writing because we have that experience, that sort of out of your body, timeless experience of just being one with the words and the page. And it's hard to get there because most of writing is like they see, sweating blood or whatever that Ernest Hemingway quote is. I love to, bleeding. There's something about bleeding.
Right.
About writing. I love bleeding like the way I love bleeding, making myself bleed. But I'm wondering, at what point did you say, okay, I've tried this 3 times. I'm going to keep going. And say, oh, this one feels like it's working.
I think what it was, I was trying to write historical fiction, and
so hard.
I had no idea, and the first book wasn't really working, and I thought, well, maybe I just didn't do the characters right, or it was all revolved around plot. But I remember doing some research, and I was at a library in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and I asked. Or the librarian asked me what my book was about. And I told her it was about a boy who grows up in a log cabin in New Hampshire in the 1740s. And she said, why the hell is he in a log cabin? We've had sawmills since the 1600s. And I'm like, I can't even get 3 words about my book right, let alone. And what I realized was that my story would glide around. And I thought, what I'll do is I'll try to write a thriller to figure out how to plot, and everything from there just kind of fell into place. I understood the tension and the suspense, and I've been reading those my whole life. So it worked because I think I changed what I was trying to do. And certainly it's much easier not having to be historically accurate, and you can just live inside your imagination,
Yeah. But thrillers have their own challenges. So tell me about what you said you've been reading thrillers your whole life. What were some of the authors and books that really influenced you?
Definitely Ken Follett. He's
been on this podcast. He's one of my favorites. Yeah.
Is that right? Oh my gosh. Now you're going to make me nervous.
No.
Handles. I'm like, why is he talking to me? Nice. He's great.
No, he came on and he's one of my idols. And I think Pillars of the Earth is one of my favorite books I've ever read. But
that's absolutely my favorite book. Yeah. But I studied Key to Rebecca and Eye of the Needle. And
Incredible
I wanted to figure out what was it about these books that I loved so much, and what was it, and down to how often was he doing interiority, how much of his paragraphs were action, how long were his sentences. I mean, I
Wow.
went really nerdy, but just trying to figure out how does he do it, and what am I doing, and where do I need to improve? But being 59, I kind of cut my teeth on John Le Carre and or Marie Carré. I'm not even sure how you say.
Yeah.
But they
I've
were.
never understood that.
Yeah, I'm going to ruin it. We'll cut that later. But they were different kind of thrillers. Were a little different than they are now. Not to say one is better than another. I don't read too many thrillers in my own genre because I tend to like that character transformation, that journey that they go on and they change. And I think when it is all action and it is all plot, that they tend to be a little lighter read than what I'm looking for. I think when I started out, I was going to try to write a novel that I would want to read, something that reminded me of what I grew up on that still fit in 2024.
Yeah. Well, back to Ken Follett for a second. I mean, first of all, the guy writes historical thrillers, which is like two things rolled into one, right? He's doing the history, but he's also doing the thriller, which is just remarkable. But one of the things that I do remember he said in our interview was that he always left the end of every chapter with a little suspense, like teaser. Like he would never end a chapter without you being like, oh, I've got to read the next. Did you take that? Was that one of the lessons you took away from him?
Yeah, I think that's the pacing thing that makes you not be able to put a book down, that there are questions that need to get answered, and damn it, he better answer them the next chapter. And then you throw out a couple more questions, and maybe one gets answered and two more questions pop up, and you just drive through a book because you can't put it down. I think that those are the books that I enjoy reading, and hopefully I was able to do that.
You did it really well. And your book has a lot of twists and a lot of plot twists. So I wonder, when you're writing a book like that, did you already kind of have it mapped out either on a board somewhere or in your mind, or did you kind of do the pantsing it, where you're kind of going as you go?
Yeah. I've been asked, like, am I an outliner or am I a pantser?
Yeah.
And I tell people I'm more of a pantsy liner. You know,
you had an outline, but you kind of you knew where I was going.
Yeah. I kind of start with something that interests me, a question. You know, and in this book, it was, what would it be like if you were in your 20s and the FBI came into your office and said that everything you thought about your life wasn't right and that you were kidnapped as a kid? Mm-hmm. So I knew that was my question of, like, what would that be like? And when you start a story, and then of course, that kidnapping has to be the crime of the century. So if you start a book that big, it can only get bigger from there.
Yeah.
And I a little bit about the ending, but the thing that I've enjoyed about writing is that I don't know exactly where a story is going to go. I can put a little bit of the spine in, and I try to put a little bit of where the heart's going to be. But as far as the flesh and what it's going to look like, I don't really know until I'm well into it. And even then, I'm excited when a scene surprises me. And as I'm writing, I'm trying to leave a lot of openings for a lot of choices that I can make later on, because I really don't know exactly where the story's going to go. And the twists that happen are a result of me being in the shower or driving to the grocery store and going, oh my God.
That's it.
Yeah. So, and because there was no hint of it, that maybe they're a little more concealed, because they certainly were concealed to me as I was writing it, you know?
Now it's I guess the genre is political thriller because I mean, I don't know. Is that what you would consider? It's a crime thriller meets a political thriller. I don't even really know, but there is politics somewhat involved because it involves Washington, you know, it involves a senator.
Yeah.
Was that, you said you don't really read those kinds of thrillers, but are you interested in politics? Why did you root it in that place?
It was the natural place for the story to go. I'm not a political creature, but you can't escape it. And I see where the country is right now, and it's not in a good place. And to me, it felt like taking that anxiety and polarization and trying to put a story into it. And that felt right, but probably somebody that would avoid a political conversation at almost all costs. Because I think I'd rather, going to sound weird, but we only have so much. We probably have a thimbleful of influence in this world, and it just feels like every time you bring up a subject like that, there's anger or cynicism or whatever. And I just that's not what I want to pour out into the world. I'd much rather try something else. So
yeah.
But anyway, to answer your question, it was so ripe for this kind of story that, I had to do that for sure. Yeah.
There's a lot of really good characters in the book. I'm wondering if any are inspired by real life, particularly Arno, who's like the evil character in it. Are they inspired by movies you've seen, books you've read, or are they actually like people, or maybe they're a combination of everything?
There's really only one character that was inspired by a real person. And I'll get to her in a second. Arno he kind of became real as I wrote. I want to talk about one of those things that kind of surprises you. Early in the book, he's about ready to kidnap these kids, and he looks in the back seat. And for whatever reason, I wrote that there was 2 empty booster seats and roses, that he was going to give somebody. And I'm like, why the hell would he give roses? And as those questions got answered, his character developed as well as the story. So that was a nice surprise. The thing that I was most worried about, and she wasn't going to be a real character when I originally did the book, but I needed somebody for my grizzled FBI guy to talk to. So I thought, well, I'll put a rookie FBI agent, Emma Noble, into this situation so she can talk to the grizzled FBI guy. And then I thought, how dangerous is that for a guy in his late 50s to try to write a 25-year-old woman? How many ways could I get that wrong? That's going to be really, really, yeah. And and I thought of my daughter who lives in Brooklyn, who is funny and awkward.
Is she around that age?
Yeah. And driven. And she is. So I just kind of wrote who my daughter is, and I fell in love with this character, who becomes kind of the star of the book. And the next book is going to be an Emma Noble book. So she sold herself pretty well.
Yeah. Was your original protagonist the grizzled FBI agent?
Briar Metcalf. Yeah, I think he was definitely a supporting character. I think the book I was thinking about was going to revolve around this kid, Ben Danvers,
right,
who's from Boston, who
gets kidnapped,
gets put in this impossible situation of trying to, he's shy, he's reserved. All of a sudden, he finds out that his real mom is about to be inaugurated as the vice president in 5 days, and he does not want to be in the spotlight. And he's trying to figure out who this woman was that raised him in Vermont. And he has this choice of either jumping into the spotlight or swimming upstream to figure out where he came from. And he chooses the latter. And then he gets himself in a world of difficulty because of it. But I would say Ben was probably the lead. But then as I wrote, I realized that this is a story about 3 people. It's a story about Arno Farre, that assassin, the cult assassin who's in love with the woman that kidnapped Ben. It's a story about Emma Noble, who's on her first day on the job and finds herself in incredibly difficult situations and not being able to trust anybody, and about a young guy, Ben, who is trying to find himself and try to figure out a way not to get murdered in the process.
And you knew each one of those characters had to change in order for it to be a novel that's going to work. They all have to go through some transformation. A lot of people don't know that rule. It's a simple rule, though. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think, I think that's when we were talking about before, the thriller that you read now. I mean, is a Reacher book, is he going through an arc, or is he the same person every time? I think the reader today falls in love with a character, and that character doesn't change, but the things that are around him do. And I particularly like the stories where somebody is changing, because we all change. And when you are in the crucible and things are tightening down and it can't go any worse, if you don't change, then nothing's going to happen. And so, I kind of am one of those believers too, that somebody has to be on a journey and has to transform. And at the end of a book, they have to be somebody different than who they started as.
Was this all, I'm sure this wasn't all smooth sailing for you once you discovered, once you felt more comfortable in the thriller genre and you had your characters and you had a basic story. What were the sort of challenges that you hit that you maybe didn't anticipate? And I'm curious how you overcame them, because in the other cases, you kind of put the book down and stop, but in this case, you overcame them. But tell me about like some of the, if somebody was to be listening to this and thinking about writing a thriller or really thinking about it, writing any book, what were some of the obstacles that you faced?
I did this with the first 2 or 3 that I tried, was that when I find myself in trouble, I've always worked harder, try to work myself out of it. So what that meant was that I would just write myself into places and then have to go back. And then where was the last truthful thing that I actually said in this damn book? And then start again. And I would write myself to the right and to the left and to the, all over the place. And that was a mistake that I learned too late, honestly. It took years to figure out that, maybe take a beat and smoke a cigar and stare at the wall for a while and try to figure out there's umpteen places where this story could go. Which one makes the most sense for tomorrow when we sit down and write? So I spend the first part of the day trying to write 1,000 words and being creative. And then I probably spend the second half of the day staring at the wall, being analytical about where does this thing go? And I feel like that duality is something that I've figured out now it serves me a lot better than, trying to write myself free from, my problem.
Interesting. So your process is more kind of thinking it through in your head than kind of like writing it out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that literally sitting and staring at the wall, or do you take walks, or what's your process in terms of?
Well, I hike, and sometimes ideas come that way, but I've got a comfortable chair behind me and I smoke a cigar and I stare at the wall. And I've convinced myself that I can call that working. But yeah, that's what I do. I think the other thing that I realized is that you got to keep the line tight, that if there's slack in the story, that there's a problem, and I've got to figure out where that line went slack. And in this book, I had the story happening over the course of 14 days. And I thought, well, maybe the slack comes out if I can do it over the course of 10 days. And then I thought, well, if I can do it over the course of 10 days, maybe I can figure out a way that this story happens in 5 days, which became a really interesting spreadsheet of where is this character, where is that character, and where will they end up meeting? And,
with time consideration.
Yeah. And honestly, John, I've been having so much fun. Like I didn't expect, I know that, sitting down and writing is probably never not going to be a chore, but the idea of really letting my imagination really fly, that is an absolute blast. Having your brain light up. And I think also maybe being a little older and really discovering something about yourself that you didn't know was there. That's a pretty gratifying.
What did you discover about you? What did you discover about yourself that surprised you?
I think I was surprised at how I stuck to it. There was no stakes. I mean, it wasn't that I was asking writer.
No deadlines.
There was no deadline. There was nothing that said I need to get this book out because I need to pay the mortgage. There was really no reason to keep going other than I was curious about wanting to see if I could do it, and that I told my wife I would write her a book. I don't think she expected it to take 3 or 4 years of.
I was going to ask how long it took. It was 3-4 years.
This book took a year, but the other ones, and she was pissed when I put those other ones down because I would read to her and she loved those characters. And I said, yeah, it's not working. And she's like, no. Don't throw them away. I'm like, no, they got to go in the drawer.
You've got to feel it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you stuck with it. What would be your advice to other people who want to give up? Because I think a lot of people are going to have that experience where they're in the middle of a novel and they're like, this isn't working. I've had that experience where
I think that, when I tell people that, I wrote for 3 years, 3 different books and none of them worked and I had to throw them in the can, they're like, oh, that's horrible. I'm like, no, it was only horrible for a week 3 times. I was thinking that, the whole time I was writing those books, that this is going to be great, or I'll figure it out, or whatever else. So most of that year was me brimming with confidence that this thing was going to work out, and then realizing it wasn't. And then you're in this period of mourning for a week, and then you're like, but I could do this. And then you jump into the next thing. So I found the process kind of fascinating, but yeah, I think that surprised me. Like, why did I keep going? And as far as advice, I think there is so much work that I didn't realize you have to do to be able to call yourself a writer. Because we all have the same vocabulary for the most part. We all have our own experiences. There really it shouldn't be as hard as it is, and you can't, I've read probably 30 books on writing. I've watched every master class. I've read voraciously all sorts of different writing, just trying to teach myself how to do it. And I thought I'll be able to crack the code the first time. And you can't. You either figure it out or you don't. So I guess I would encourage somebody to keep doing it if they're enjoying it or they find some value in it. But it's not something to beat your head against the curb about either. If it's not so.
If it's not click.
Yeah. I kind of feel like there's a certain kind of person that probably does well as a writer too, is that I think you have to have this duality. You have to have this ego that says, I can do this and I'm capable of doing it, but also having a humility to say maybe it's not as good as it should be and it's not working. I've met people that are too humble and their confidence is too low and they think that everything that they're writing is shit, and it's not. And I've watched people that are so in love with what they're writing that they can't identify the problems that they've got. So I feel like that's a challenge, is trying to bring both of those parts of your personality together. Like, hey, have the confidence to do this thing, but understand it's probably going to suck for a long time until you get it right. And I don't know, it was Anne something about, and it really helped me. Because you read a book and it's perfect. All the punctuation is perfect. The ideas are perfect. It's amazing. And she said that all books and all authors write shit until it's no longer shitty.
Right. Yeah.
Can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah. It's not a family. It's not a family friendly. Not a family.
But that made me feel a little better, was that everything that I read is completely polished. But it wasn't always that way.
That wasn't the first draft. They call it the vomit draft is often the first draft, where it's just you're getting it all out there. And then a lot of people enjoy the rewriting process more than the actual first draft process. What's your take on that? Did you enjoy the rewriting?
When I write, it's almost like an underpainting. I know that some people are trimming the heck out of everything that they have to go from 150,000 words to 100,000. And my problem is I'm going from 60,000. I've got to beef it up to 90.
Economical writer. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to sound like a psycho, but the other thing that I realized that there were more people than just me in the writing room, and I actually named them. So I had Pablo, who was helping me. He had all the good ideas. Stanley was the editor. And Stanley brought Claude, who sat with a pipe in the corner and just called everything derivative. And all three of them.
So these are the critics you made up in your head?
Yeah, in my head. In my head.
Yeah.
And they none of them were speaking together. And Claude would say you're an idiot. Pablo would leave the room. But then after a while, when you start figuring it out, you realize that the creative person has to be listening to the editor, and the editor has to still be true to the creative. And when you hear Claude in the background say something is derivative or whatever, you really need to listen, because he's probably not wrong. And accepting all of those people that were in there with me went a long way towards me learning how to write, because I don't think you can do one of those three things well and not the others.
Right. You chose to write the book in the third person. A lot of times when I sit down to write a novel, when I've sat down in the past to write a novel, I always, for some reason, my default is first person. And maybe because they're sort of it's a character that I'm excited about and I want it to come from that person's perspective. But I realize the value in your book of writing in third person is you're able to have a lot of different characters. You're sort of you're the omniscient, you're able to kind of be in a lot of different places at once. Was there ever a thought about writing it, from a first person perspective, or was it always, is that sort of the nature of the thriller genre to kind of like to be?
Well, I don't know. I mean, one of my guilty pleasures is Diana Gabaldon, who, oh gosh, what are the, I'm going to lose
Are they the
books,
Scottish? Are they the Scottish?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Highlander. The Highlander.
The Highlander. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so she does an interesting thing where she will, when she has one character, they're writing in first person, and then the rest of the book is in third. I thought that was kind of the unique thing. I think I haven't played around with that. I'm not sure I would do it in this Emma Noble series because I'm not sure I'm a good enough writer to do that yet. I mean, I haven't stretched that.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
That yet. If I can, but I think that's coming. I think that's one of the things that I enjoy is challenging myself. So the second book is a little different than the first one, and I'm trying to do things that I didn't do in the first one. So that's something down the road, but I feel like, every time I'm putting the finishing touches on the second book and I need to start writing the third, there's so much learning to be done that I still feel like a novice in a lot of ways, for sure.
All right, let's talk about getting it published. So it's one thing to write a book. It's a whole other kettle of fish to get it actually published. This is not a self-published book. What was the process of getting a publisher? Did you first get an agent? Work through the process.
So here was the conventional wisdom that I had heard was that if you can manage to get an agent, you're set. Everything will fall into place.
Oh yeah, right.
So that's what I had heard.
I'm going to dispel that myth right now, as somebody who has an agent and has not sold. Yeah, right.
I'm happy to help you dispel that.
Yeah.
So what happened was I wrote the book and honestly, I finished the book and I gave it to my wife and I'm like, is this a book? She's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I know, but I've read books and this is mine. And is it a real book? She's like, yeah, it's a real book. So I still didn't, so I sent it to an editor who gave it back to me and said, this is a little dark for me. She kind of did cozy stuff. She recommended Ed Stackler, who is a great thriller editor. And I asked Ed, probably shouldn't use his name, but I asked him if he knew any agents. And he didn't know who I was. He said, no, I don't, but I'll help you with your book. And he read it and he said, this is the best book I've read in like 4 years. Who do you want to work with? So he named he had a list of the top 10 agents in New York. And so he said, we picked one and she read it and she's got Pulitzer Prize winning authors and she's massive agent. And she goes, yeah, this is going to be our big book for 2021.
Oh my God. Yeah. By the way, that's another thing people have to realize. This is a long process. It's taken years.
Yeah. So this is going to be our big book for 2021. And they immediately sold it to Germany and to Hungary. And I am trying to think of how big is this advance going to be? And then, that was October. I think we met again in February and she handed me probably a list of 30 really nice rejections from the top publishers.
Nice.
Yeah. Love the book. It just doesn't fit our list.
Yeah.
Just doesn't fit our list. And of course, we're coming right off of January 6th. We're coming off of this book. I think it's better coming out now than it would have maybe then anyway.
And I'm going to say it now that there was a period, it might not be, that maybe an older white man was not exactly what people were looking for, right?
I'm glad you said it. I think that's absolutely
it's been public.
true.
I mean, it's been very public. There was a real movement, not that they were but they were looking for, and rightly so, for more diverse voices, especially after
I tell
Floyd.
People that I got winged in a righteous war, a little friendly fire,
Yeah, exactly.
So there was nothing for a year, nothing in the second year. And I got a call last September and they said, Andy, we're out of bullets. We did everything we could and you're on your own. It was not the experience that I expected it to be. Thankfully, I found a great small publisher in Michigan. And they had done a lot of regional publishing and they had just started a national program. So I think I'm the first one that they've done with that. But I couldn't imagine a better team. And also I'm learning a process and I have agency, which I didn't have before. I kind of had to sit on my hands for 2 years hoping and not having anything. So I'm actually now probably benefiting from all the having to be a part of some conversations that I definitely wouldn't have been in if it was a big five publisher. And, they just said, just write your next one and leave this to us.
Right. So are you feeling like they have a good distribution plan for you? Are you going to be available in all the stores or stuff like that? Is this going
Yeah, it's everywhere. It's really, really cool. I am super lucky. They believe in the book. I think the sell sheets just went out to all over the country yesterday. We've got a big advertising push that they're helping me with. I've got an amazing publicist that I'm working with.
Great.
She's amazing.
Kim. Was that your Kim Dower? We'll call her out.
Yeah.
Was that
absolutely.
your find, or did the publisher put you in touch with her? How did you find Kim?
Yeah. So I thought what I'm going to do is my wife and I sat down and after this disappointment with the agent and with the lack of interest from publishing, we're at a crossroads. If I'm going to be a writer and commercial fiction, this is something that, you've got to get the word out.
Yep.
Is the book good enough to make an investment in? We both agreed that it was. So I was looking at publicists and I'd asked the publisher, does he know of anybody? He said, well, I know one, but she works with kind of the best people in the world. And I'm not sure.
Hannah is one of her clients, let's just say. Kristen, Joyce Maynard.
Yeah. So it was funny. So I talked to Kim and she read the book and she's like, absolutely. I would love to help you.
She's a big champion of the book. She got me excited about it too. Yeah.
She's been fantastic. So it's been a little bit of my own trying to build a readership. It's been the publisher. It's been Kim. And I couldn't be prouder of the team I've got around me. They're really, really some solid people and they're nice and they all kind of believe in the book and we'll see what happens. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. Well, I'm really encourage my listeners to pick up the book, anything to support Andrew and his journey, but also because it's just a really good book. And I feel like it's the kind of book that will really catch on with word of mouth. So please read the book. It's really worth it. Even if you're not a political thriller fan, like this is not my type of book. I'm like you. I like historical fiction. Like next to your book, I'm looking at my desk right now. I've got James Michener's, Centennial right here, which is, a very different type of book.
Yes.
But I love this book.
I was like, huge Michener fan.
Yeah, I'm sure we have the same taste.
Caribbean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all incredible.
Age.
Yeah. Ken Follett. I mean, I love all those people. I love historical fiction. I love Highlander. And that's not even written for us. That's like a romance, but I loved it.
Yeah.
So, all right. But I am curious. So what are you reading now? I always love hearing reading recommendations.
I've got a lot, and I probably am into too many books at the same time.
Yeah, you probably start with them.
Yeah, I have a problem with that. I just finished Robert Olmsted's book. It's Cold Black Horse. It's more literary. Kristen Hanna's The Women that we finished. I finished that recently. That was phenomenal. You got a 6'4" guy crying.
Publicly. She's really good at making people cry. Oh boy.
Yeah. Tim Harkaway wrote a book called Titanium Noir.
Okay.
So weird. It's fantastic. The guy's got an incredible imagination. So, and I've been reading, while I don't get, I guess I just did read a Baldacci book, The 630 Man. There's, some of the noir books I enjoy, like Bernard Chopin and some others. So I try to read a lot of different stuff.
Things.
Probably for 20 years, I read a lot, almost exclusively nonfiction. So yeah, I'm kind of all over the map of what I read. The one thing that I try not to do is to get too close to what I'm going to be writing about, because I still have that worry that I'm going to have somebody else's voice in my head as I try to write.
That's a good point.
I don't even know if that's a real thing, but
also it could be intimidating when you're reading somebody who's like really good at what you're doing, and then you're like, ugh. This is that, or then and I would also worry that I'd be like in some ways, like plagiarizing a little bit, like without unintentionally. I remember I was reading Donna Tartt, The Goldfinch, which is a great book, and I started writing some fiction. I really started imitating her. Like she got in my head, and I started like doing a Donna Tartt book, and it's like Donna Tartt can only do Donna Tartt. I can't. Yeah, so it just was weird. Yeah. Well, you say you steal, great artists steal. So I think, but when you have all these voices in your head, sometimes it kind of comes out as your own eventually.
I think one of the things maybe it's difficult for everybody as they get started. I don't know if it was for you, but you obviously as a writer have your voice, your thing that you have. Now that I've finished my second book, you kind of start wondering, okay, what is my voice? Like what do people like? What is it that I like? Is there something that I didn't do in the second book that I should have done? You start having all these questions about where you should go next. I don't know if at least that's my concern. I don't know if that's everybody else's, but that thing of, okay, who am I as a writer? Because it's still new.
Yeah, totally. I get it. Well, I'm happy you did it. I'm happy you took the journey, and congratulations. Book is called Fortunate Son. Sort of see it here on my screen if you're watching on YouTube. And it is written by Andrew Bridgeman, my guest. Andrew, good luck with the book. And did I just hear that you've already written your second one? Did you just say that?
Yeah, the second one is going to get released. It's, so the story about that FBI agent who was in her first day, she is the star of the second book. It's called A Noble Sin.
Good. Okay.
That should get released, we think, in May of 2025. So next spring.
Very exciting. Well, hopefully we'll have you back on the show. And when we have you back on the show, May, you'll be up there with the likes of Kristen Hanna and Joyce Maynard and all those people we love, Ken Follett.
I'm sure that'll be right. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be right. Hey, someone can dream. I mean, Colleen Hoover, she kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, these things happen. So good luck. And, or I don't know what the word is, break a pencil. All right. Well, thank you again, Andrew, for coming on the show.
It was great, John. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. It was good getting to know you too.
Thank you for listening to Right About Now, hosted by my dad, Jonathan Small. If you like what you heard, there are a few ways you can help support the show. First, please leave a rating and review wherever you may listen to this podcast. This really helps others find Right About Now. You can also head over to patreon.com/rightaboutnowpodcast to make a donation. Finally, subscribe to the Right About Now newsletter called Small Talk on substack.com. This is Ella, encouraging you all to do the right thing.